autumn of 1888, someone began killing women in the East End of London. 5 murders, 11 weeks, all within a square mile of fog-drenched streets. The killer was never caught. No arrest, no trial, no name. More than 130 years have passed. Thousands of investigators, historians, and amateur detectives have spent entire lifetimes trying to identify him. Governments have opened and closed the files. DNA has been extracted from 100-year-old evidence. Books have been written. Films have been made. Nobody knows. What we do know is this. In those 11 weeks, one killer changed London forever. Changed the way newspapers covered crime. Changed the way police investigated murder. And left behind a mystery so perfectly unsolvable that it has never, not once, been conclusively closed. This is the story of Jack the Ripper.
To understand the Ripper case, you have to understand Whitechapel. In 1888, the East End of London was one of the most desperate places in the world. Overcrowded, impoverished. A square mile where tens of thousands of people lived packed into crumbling tenements, sleeping in shifts, fighting over beds in lodging houses that charged 4p a night. If you didn't have 4p, you slept on the street. The women who were murdered, all 5 of them, lived in that world. They were not wealthy. They were not connected. They were women surviving at the very edge of Victorian society, doing whatever they could to make it through each night. The police knew Whitechapel well. It was their most difficult beat. Loud, overcrowded, dark after sundown, full of narrow courts and alleyways that a man could disappear into in seconds. Gas lamps threw weak orange light over cobblestones. Fog was thick enough to cut. It was the perfect place to hide. The Metropolitan Police were not well equipped for what was coming. In 1888, there was no fingerprinting, no forensic science, no DNA, no criminal profiling. Detectives worked from witnesses, from physical evidence, from informants, in a neighbourhood where nobody trusted the police, where dozens of people might have been in a given alleyway at any given hour, and where the fog swallowed everything. The Ripper understood that, or at least, he benefited from it. What made Whitechapel different from every other place a killer could have operated in 1888 was this. The women he targeted had no choice but to be on those streets at night. They needed money for their beds. They worked after dark. And the streets they walked were narrow, unlit, and nearly impossible to police. He knew exactly where to find them.
There were 5 murders attributed to Jack the Ripper. Investigators call them the canonical 5, the killings that, based on the method and evidence, almost certainly share a single perpetrator. Mary Ann Nichols, 43 years old, Friday, August 31st, 1888. She was found in the early hours of the morning in Bucks Row, a dark street in Whitechapel. Her throat had been cut. The murder had taken place in near total silence. Nobody heard anything. The street was less than 100 yards from occupied houses. He was already good at this. Annie Chapman, 47 years old, Saturday the 8th of September 1888, found in the backyard of a lodging house on Hanbury Street. The same method, throat cut, injuries that showed the killer had knowledge of anatomy, or something very close to it. A doctor examining the scene estimated the murder had taken less than 2 minutes. The yard backed onto a public street. The tenement above it housed 17 people. Nobody saw anything. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, Saturday, September 30th, 1888. 2 murders, 1 night, 1 hour apart. This is what investigators call the double event, and it tells us something important about the Ripper. Elizabeth Stride was killed first, in a narrow court off Berners Street. The evidence suggests her killer was interrupted, that someone or something forced him to leave quickly, before he had finished. He didn't go home. Within the hour, Catherine Eddowes was murdered in Mitre Square, just 10 minutes walk away. Her injuries were far more severe than Stride's, as if he was finishing something, as if the interruption had made him more dangerous, not less. A piece of her apron was found nearby. Someone had used it, apparently, and dropped it. On the wall above where the apron was found, someone had written in chalk, "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." The Metropolitan Police Commissioner ordered it wiped away before it could be photographed, fearing it would incite violence against Jewish residents. That decision is still debated today. Mary Jane Kelly, 25 years old, Friday, November 9th, 1888. She was the youngest of the five. She was found in her own room on Dorset Street, the only murder committed indoors. She had brought her killer in from the street herself. The injuries were the most severe of all 5 victims. The killer had time. He had privacy. He was not interrupted. It was the last canonical Ripper murder. After Mary Jane Kelly, the killings stopped. No more letters, no more bodies with the same signature. Whatever happened to the Ripper after the 9th of November 1888, whether he died, was imprisoned, emigrated, or simply stopped, nobody knows. He was there, and then he wasn't. In late September 1888, a letter arrived at the Central News Agency in London. It was addressed simply, "Dear Boss." The writer claimed to be the killer. He mocked the police. He said he was down on whores. He promised he wasn't finished. He signed it, Jack the Ripper. That name, Jack the Ripper, had not existed before that letter. The newspapers had been calling him the Whitechapel murderer. It was this letter, posted by an unknown hand, that gave him the name the world still uses today. Most investigators now believe the Dear Boss letter was a hoax, written by a journalist to sell papers. But 2 weeks later, a small cardboard box arrived at a vigilance committee in Whitechapel. Inside, half a preserved human kidney, and a letter, from hell. That was how it began. The writing was barely literate, nothing like the Dear Boss letter, a completely different hand, a completely different voice. The writer claimed the kidney had come from one of the victims. He said he had fried and eaten the other half. Medical examination could not rule out that the kidney had come from Catherine Eddowes. That letter was almost certainly real. The contrast between the 2 letters has fascinated investigators ever since. The Dear Boss letter, articulate, performative, written for an audience. The From Hell letter, functional, almost indifferent. The work of someone who had done something and wanted someone to know about it. 2 letters, 2 completely different people, or 2 completely different moods. Either the Ripper wrote one and a journalist wrote the other, or the Ripper wrote both and contained multitudes that investigators still haven't resolved. The Metropolitan Police investigation into the Ripper murders was the largest in London's history at that point. Over 2,000 people were interviewed, hundreds of suspects were identified and eliminated. Police flooded Whitechapel. Plainclothes officers worked the streets. Vigilance committees of local residents patrolled at night. And still, nothing. The investigation was hampered from the beginning. The crime scenes were contaminated before detectives arrived. The From Hell letter, possibly the most significant piece of evidence in the entire case, was handled so carelessly that any forensic value it might have held was lost within hours of its arrival. 2 separate police forces were investigating simultaneously, the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police, and they barely cooperated with each other. And at the centre of it all was a neighbourhood that did not trust authority. People who might have seen something, heard something, knew something, they had reasons not to come forward. Whitechapel kept its secrets. The investigation officially wound down without a named suspect. Some detectives believed they knew who had done it. Their private notes, released decades later, named different men. They didn't agree with each other. The case was never formally closed. It still isn't. Over 130 years, more than 500 suspects have been named. Most have been dismissed. A handful keep coming back. Montague John Druitt, a barrister and schoolteacher who drowned in the Thames in December 1888, weeks after the last murder. His own family reportedly believed he was the killer. One senior detective named him as the most likely suspect in private notes. but there is no direct evidence linking him to any of the murders. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber living in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. He was identified by a witness, reportedly, but the witness refused to testify in court because both he and Kosminski were Jewish, and testifying would have meant identifying a fellow Jew. In 2014, a researcher claims DNA from a shawl found near Catherine Eddowes matched Kosminski's living descendants. The claim was disputed by other scientists. The DNA evidence remains contested. Francis Tumblety, an American quack doctor who was in London during the murders and fled to the United States in November 1888, the same month as the last killing. He had a documented hatred of women. Scotland Yard sent officers to pursue him across the Atlantic. He was never charged. And then there is the question that has circled the case for a century. What if it wasn't the man from the streets? Some investigators have argued the surgical precision of the injuries points to medical knowledge, a doctor, a surgeon, someone trained in anatomy. Others argue that the evidence of skill has been overstated, and that the injuries required no specialist knowledge at all. Nobody agrees. Nobody has ever agreed. The Ripper case sits in a unique position in criminal history, a case where almost everything is documented, the victims, the dates, the letters, the investigation, and where the central question remains, after more than a century, completely unanswered. We know what happened. We know when. We know where. We don't know who. The Ripper murders lasted 11 weeks. 5 women were killed. A city was terrorised. An investigation that consumed enormous resources ended without a charge, without a trial, without a name. And somewhere in Whitechapel, in the autumn fog of 1888, a man walked home. He might have been a doctor, a butcher, a barrister, a foreign visitor, a local resident so ordinary that nobody looked twice. He might have lived for another 40 years, on the same streets, among the same people, reading the newspaper accounts of his own crimes. Or he might have stopped because he couldn't stop himself any other way. The Ripper case produced one of the most studied, most theorised, most exhaustively documented mysteries in criminal history, and produced no answer. Every new technique, DNA, linguistic analysis, geographical profiling, has pointed in a direction without arriving at a destination. Some cases end in a courtroom. This one ends in the fog. This has been the Dark Files. If this case left you with questions, it's supposed to. Subscribe. New case every Friday.